I'm going to tie a fullback, and this is a woven style nymph, and I'm starting off with a size 10 scud hook in the vise. I'm going to add some additional weight to it, so I'm just going to take my wraps of lead, starting at about the point in the hook, and then I'll wrap this all the way up to just behind the eye. This is going to be a relatively slim bodied fly too, so that'll help it sink. The thread that I'm going to use is an 8/0, and this is in a light olive. And I'm going to get that started just in front of the lead. I'll reach back and I'll take my wraps through to secure, and I can just break off the excess. As the name implies, this is a woven style nymph that has a back to it, and I'm going to use a fly speck olive and black thin skin, and I've cut a strip that has a slight taper to it. And so I'm going to tie it in narrow end first. So I'm just trimming one of it to the narrow end to a point to help me tie it in, and I'll put that right behind my lead and tie that all the way down the bend in the hook. And then back up. This also has a rib, and the rib that I'm going to use is a gold wire, and this is in a small size. So I'll take off maybe a 3-4 inch section here, and I'll tie that in as well, right behind that lead. You can tie these in a variety of colors. What I'm going to use today is an olive and a gold or yellow color, and so I'm going to take off 3 strands from the 4 strand spools of both, and I've just found that for this size it gives me the right body shape that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to wet the ends so that the 3 sides, the 3 ends come together. I'm going to tie that in, and I'll do the same with my olive. And so I'll just again wet the ends and tie them in down the other side. And I want these to be roughly the same length. That is, the floss to be the same length, and I also don't want them to be too long, because then it just makes it more difficult to weave. You just want to make sure that you spend a little bit of time here on your body to make sure that you have good transition points, especially around that lead. Just like with any other underbody, any imperfections underneath will show when you start wrapping your material over it. So I'm going to tie on or whip finish my thread and remove it, and I take it off when I weave, just so that it doesn't get in the way. So now I'm going to rotate my vise upside down, and I'm going to move it so that it's facing me, and then we can get to the weave. Alright, so I've rotated my vise, and this is how it looks. This is how it'll look when you tie it, so it's facing me. The weave has always been something I've struggled with, getting a real good weave caught on camera, so hopefully this shows up alright. I've got my wire kind of stretched out behind here. I've got my thin skin back and away. If you find that it's getting in your weave, you can always tape it back. And I've got my 2 strands here, my yellow and my olive, and I just want to make sure that I'm separating those. And again, when I do weave with floss, I always like to get them pretty saturated. It really helps with the weave and kind of keeping them in place. So I'm just going to introduce some moisture here. and then I can start to weave, and I'm going to make the yellow my bottom and the green my top. And so I'm just going to take my yellow underneath, then I'll wrap my green around and behind, and then just repeat the process. So yellow underneath, I wrap my green around and behind, yellow underneath, wrap my green around and behind, yellow underneath, green around and behind, yellow underneath, green around and behind, you just want to make sure you keep constant pressure on the floss as you do this so that it doesn't slip. Some people can weave without changing hands. I cannot. So I use both hands in collaboration here. So I'm not going to weave this all the way to the eye because the thorax is going to be covered with a natural material. I'm going to use hare's ear. So when I have them, I'm just going to pinch them here at the top. And now I can rotate my vise and just keep pressure on the bottom. And I'll bring this all the way around and then start to finish the fly. So now I've rotated the vise back around to a more traditional position, and now I have to reattach my thread. So I'm holding the floss down here at the bottom, and all that I'm going to do is pay out enough thread to pinch it between my fingers as well. And then I'm just going to start to wrap this into the floss, and when I've taken enough wraps to hold it, I can remove the end sections and now really just make sure it's good and tied down. I'm going to pick my thorax to be about at the 2/3 mark here of the hook shank. So I'll leave my thread in that position, and now I'll pull this thin skin up and over, and if I've done it right, you can still see kind of the knots and the weave on either side. And so I'll hold it in that position. I'll take a wrap just to hold it in place, maybe two, and now I'm going to come back through with my wire, and this will really help to make sure that it stays in place. So I'm just following the grooves that I created with the weave, making sure that's in nice and centered. And then when I get up to my thread position, I'll just back my thread out and put another wrap in to replace it. Then I can tie this off underneath. And I can just break off the excess wire. And just make sure everything's good and bound down. So now I'm going to come back through and add in my thorax. For that I'm going to use a hare's mask. So I'll just take my dubbing wax and apply a little bit here. And I'll take off some of my hair's mask here. And get that dubbing noodle started on my thread. Then I'll just hold back that thin skin. And just start building out that thorax. Maybe another pinch here. So I'll reapply some wax. And now I can pull the thin skin up and over. And tie it off. I'm going to switch my hook position here slightly. Now I can trim the rest of this and a whip finish. And trim. And if you caught some of these hairs, just come back through and trim them up. If you want, you can pick this out and make it even more leggy. And you can also apply some Sally Hansen's to some of the back here. Sometimes floss. Tends to fray a little bit. As mentioned, this is the fullback version. I also tie this where the thin skin only starts over the thorax and the rest is left up. I'll hopefully get one of those tutorials out here in a bit. So that is my fullback.